welcome to Everything Under the Moon.
With Mel and Stell.
Welcome to show number 2. Okay, whatever, cut. Sight Unseen, Science, UFO Invisibility, and Transgenic Beings.
Yes. It is going to be that kind of episode.
Oh God, I hated that laugh so much. Can you say that again?
I feel it. No.
Just in case it's...
Okay, I loved it. It is going to be that kind of episode. And I could not be more excited to dive into this topic today. So,
I'm really excited. I think that alien abduction is completely out of the realm of something that you can talk about at a bar with normal people. You get a lot of weird looks for even mentioning it at work. I mentioned skinwalkers the other day at work offhand, and this guy was like, well, if it makes you feel any better, they don't exist. And I was like, okay, like, and I don't, you
Thanks,
don't have to
bud.
believe. Yeah, like, you don't have to believe, but can you not? So, anyway, very excited to talk about this.
yeah. Well, okay. So to clarify, this is the title of the book that I have read just for you guys. And I pulled it from my conspiracy shelf. So a few apartments ago, I used to have this bookshelf kind of in the middle of my living room, and I would go to all corners of the earth to try to find interesting titles to fill this bookshelf with. So I ended up calling it my conspiracy shelf because I ended up with all of these books that were from everything from nuclear fallout, disaster cover-ups, to cults in America, to fundamentalist publications about the evils of Harry Potter and Pokemon, to there's one called like Dangers of the Rainbow, talking about the new age coming, and I don't know, just sounds some pretty apocalypse happy stuff.
I'm very excited for, I don't know if we can make a whole episode out of Pokemon and whatever, but it gives me good vibes. Like, remember Angela from The Office when she was like, Harry Potter is satanic. Like, she's dressed up as the voodoo lady and she's like, I can't help it. I was exposed to Harry Potter. I don't know. And ever since then I remember in that instant watching it, growing up as a teen, like, are there people, I was pretty sheltered growing up, and I was like, are there people who actually don't read Harry Potter? And it's true. There are people who don't read Harry Potter. So I don't know. Maybe we can get into like fundy boycotts.
I'll say this: 5 thumbs up or upvotes or whatever, and we will do a special episode on the evils of Pokemon and Harry Potter.
Maybe
so I'll just
we'll put it up.
Say this about that.
Maybe we'll do a little tiny episode and put it on our Patreon. So sign up for our Patreon and listen to us talk about Pokemon and Harry Potter.
Yeah, guys, get in there on the ground floor. Like, we're the next thing. So just
hopefully,
allegedly. Allegedly, that's my favorite word in the whole English language. Oh my God, but you got to cut that out if it makes me sound like too much of a bitch.
No, okay. You want to regroup us?
Yeah. This? Oh, okay. So, Sight Unseen. So I picked up this book from Half Price Books, and it was in I want to say it was called like the metaphysical section or the spiritual section. I don't quite remember what the section was called, but I was looking for books to add to my conspiracy shelf. The title really grabbed my attention, but it was when I opened the book that the magic really happened. So the first heading that I saw when I opened up this book, Sight Unseen, said, "The luckiest little abductee." And I was pretty much sold from right then and there.
So what's that? Tell us. Just give us. You have to explain that now. Tell us about that chapter.
Well, so the luckiest little abductee is. Oh man, I'd have to open it. Let me flip to it. This is a heavy book. You can't just be doing that.
pulling stuff out of it, that's my favorite. Just pulling the best parts of books out. If
Yep.
it's anything like Missing 411, that's all you can do because you can't read it. But this book was a little more readable. So I guess. I guess I only read the first chapter.
So while I'm looking up for that heading, why don't you
Can I refresh my drink?
tell us what you think? Yeah, absolutely.
Recording.
So a little bit about the authors. Bud Hopkins lived from 1931 to 2011. He graduated with an art degree from Oberlin College and was awarded with a Guggenheim Fellowship for painting. And
Hold up. Guggenheim?
Guggenheim?
Who is Guggenheim? Not to make fun of the esteemed Guggenheim, but his name sounds really fun.
Shots fired.
Okay, we'll look up Guggenheim later, I guess.
Okay, no, that's like a very prestigious thing. Like it's a big deal.
I know, and that's why I was like, after I said that, I was like, maybe you shouldn't make fun of the Guggenheim.
Right.
Hopefully the Guggenheim
I think the Guggenheim can take it.
Yeah, and hopefully the fans aren't the violent type, you know.
The Guggenheim simps.
I can handle some blackmail, but not violence.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no. Well, I was just saying he points to two experiences in his life that led to him to go from basically painting to being a ufologist.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it's a ufologist or UFOologist, but I'm going to say ufologist because that feels right.
Sounds awesome.
So
that's what I want to be when I grow up.
The first thing that happened was he was sitting there on the radio, sitting there listening to the radio with his family on that fateful night in 1938 when the War of the Worlds was released, and there was that panic about aliens coming down to Earth. I mean, for people that don't know, that was a radio drama about an alien invasion on Earth, but there wasn't anything, like it was kind of a new thing.
I have never heard of that before, so
the
I'm
War of
glad
the
you
Worlds?
explained.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, now I feel like I have heard of it because I'll tell you the image I have in my head. I'm imagining like a Twilight Zone episode with an old 50s man on a recliner, and there's like a missile, right? Like I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm glad that it should ring a bell for you in some way because it's embedded kind of in our pop culture.
Yeah.
You know, but anyway, his family, you know, so this radio broadcast was one of the first like dramas that was released over the radio, so people didn't really understand that this was a play and not an actual news broadcast, so it caused like a huge panic. And he was there as a child, and you know, I think he was probably 7 years old. And that was a really formative experience for him, just seeing like his parents' reaction and just experiencing that with them as a family and as a nation, seeing that happen.
Those kind of things really early on in your childhood can really shape you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know that some of like the things I was exposed to, I say exposed, they were happy things. they were nice things like the outdoors and that kind of stuff. Like they shaped my interests for my entire life. So.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing was that later on in his early adulthood in the 1960s, he actually, I think, saw a UFO and made a report of it. Although I was unable to find out who he actually reported it to, which ultimately left me unsatisfied with that part of the explanation. But that he felt that whoever he reported to didn't really take it seriously. So I think between those two experiences like that, you know, he'll say that that's really what pushed him in that direction. The other author is Carol Rainey, who was actually his wife at the time. And she's just kind of the writer. Like that's sort of what she brings to their dynamic, is she's a writer, researcher. She did a few, she was also a cinematographer. I think she was involved in some TV productions as well. And fun fact, the first time that I read through this book after I bought it, years ago, I looked up Carol Rainey
Yeah.
on Facebook and added her as a friend and talked to
Oh,
her a few
wow.
times. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, I know when you were reading this, you were texting me and you had some choice thoughts. Seems like
Oh,
Carol Rainey had a very interesting life. To say the least, that's what I got from it. Like she was, I
okay.
guess, fundamentalist Christian and was very sheltered, that kind of stuff. Am I flagging your,
I'm so glad that you hit on this point.
yeah?
Because uh let me see. I actually she makes a claim. So, okay, Carol Rainey. She actually created in me any kind of doubts that I had of the credibility of this book, I have to say come from her. And it goes back to her claim in the introduction that as of the fall of 1995, she had never heard of the term alien abduction.
95?
Yeah. Like as of fall of 95, so in the fall of 95, she is in Cape Cod, I think at this point, and this is like when she gets introduced to Bud Hopkins, and they're at like a convention out by the seaside. So they end up taking like a romantic stroll by the beach. And
Oh.
this is what she talks about in her introduction. And then she's talking about this like kind of romantic walk that she's taking with this silver fox. And she says that as of like, that time, I'd never even heard the term alien abduction.
Well, that seems a little dramatic. But, oh, that sounded froggy. But I also can see how if your media is controlled when you're a child, up until 95, like you might not have had home internet. So, or internet at school.
And this, I did go back and forth on this several times, and like you're hitting on my exact
Mm-hmm.
thought process that I had at this
Yeah.
time, because then I thought, okay, you need to explain this first of all, that you made it to 1995 without hearing about UFO
Yeah.
abductions. And then she goes on to say that that she grew up in a very fundamentalist household, and that they didn't really have like TV or media, and that she didn't really even know what Elvis looked like when she was like living at home.
Yeah, but Elvis was dead.
But
Like,
she didn't know what Elvis looked like. No, I think that was during his heyday,
okay.
like
I
her
mean, that doesn't
childhood.
mean anything to me, but I'm trying to get in the frame of like, I guess for me it'd be like she didn't know what Kurt Cobain looked like. Like
Yeah,
everyone has
maybe,
seen Kurt
yeah.
Cobain's face of my generation,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we're the same generation technically, so
Yeah.
you're an elder millennial.
Yeah. Wow.
I'm
We're
trying to
just we
fucking
just go along that middle part, side part division.
yeah, exactly.
Where
Middle part for life.
you're the middle part of the generation, and I'm the aerial mermaid side part.
Middle
Like,
part for life,
you know
bitch.
what? However you want to part your hair is fine with me,
Yeah,
because we're
true.
all beautiful, aren't we?
Yeah, we just like to fight each other. It's really fun.
No, but anyway, well, so after she said like she had been raised like that, I immediately thought, okay, so maybe she hadn't heard of it.
Yeah.
So maybe that. But then again, she goes on to say after that, when I finally left home and went to college, I tried to make up for how sheltered I was by reading and studying everything that I could get my hands on and having as many philosophical conversations as I could possibly have. And then for her to say that, and then years later, she's meeting Bud Hopkins and she's never heard of alien abductions. And then she spends like half a page in her introduction trying to explain how she really, really swears that even though it sounds super unbelievable, that she totally pinky promises, guys, that she like really had never heard that term.
You
And
wonder,
all I have to say is the truth doesn't need to be explained with half a page of like filler.
or it doesn't even need to be addressed. Like,
Right?
no one was asking when's the first time you heard the word alien abduction. Like no one cares. And if the title of the book had just been with, the author said Bud Hopkins and Carol Rainey, no one would have questioned it. Like, you don't need to justify. He's your husband, for goddamn. Like, I wouldn't justify it. I'd make my husband put my name on a book. I'd be like, that we wrote that book, bitch.
She was like, I had just never heard of such a thing. But as we got closer and I got to know the abductees for myself, I began to see that they were credible witnesses, and every single thing that my husband says is true.
It seems like she's also just trying to hype up her man, you know, like she's doing that classic thing where you try to make yourself look dumb because it makes your man look smarter. You know, she's really, like, he taught me everything and there was so much to learn. It's like, yeah, because you hadn't heard the words alien abduction before. He was
older than me, but he was so handsome and dreamy, and he walked by the beach with me and talked to me about alien abductions.
I think that an older man could also seduce me with alien abduction stories. I love a little touch of gray.
Scotty. I read all of this so you don't have to. Although, that being said, I have to say, at the end of the day, I do recommend this book. It is entertaining as hell. I mean, it really is. And the abduction stories just get more and more grandiose and amazing. But according to Bud Hopkins, the hallmarks of an alien abductions of an alien abduction includes, but is not limited to, missing time events, scarring of the body, screen memories, or memories that are falsely implanted over the memory of the abduction. So like maybe a memory that just doesn't really, that kind of sticks out, doesn't make sense. It seems like it, you know, you have trouble connecting it to like maybe the rest of the situations surrounding it that you can't recall. Temporary paralysis, nosebleeds, feelings of agitation and upset surrounding the abduction event, sometimes lasting several days, and repeated events of this nature throughout a person's lifetime, and also recalled abduction experiences under hypnotic regression therapy. And I want to know, what do you think about hypnotic regression therapy, Mel?
Well, to be fair, I did not know anything until we started this.
Well, I think that's true of me too.
Yeah, I have read Communion, and I was just trying to open up my notes on that, which means Google it because I forgot to write notes on it. But I read it quite a while ago. But where was I going with this? Hypnotic regression. Yeah. You know, I'm not a psychologist, but like I've said before, I tend to believe the witness. Now, I do think that there are researchers who just in their zeal to prove their side right will sway, you know, this type of evidence because they want it to be real. And I'm not accusing Bud Hopkins of that. That would be what I would look for in a hypnotist interested in doing this work, you know, if I was trying to go through it. So that's my only thing with it, is it seems easy to manipulate from my uneducated point of view. So tell me about it. I mean,
well, the hypnotic regression, I think, is what makes Bud Hopkins' research stand out, because he's kind of like a titan among UFO researchers.
I believe Bud Hopkins was the man who hypnotized Willie Strieber.
Who wrote the book Communion?
Yes, who wrote the book Communion. Sorry, I should mention that. Communion by Willie Strieber came out, I think, in the 80s. And he was one of the first people to come out with like a huge book about it. He was already an author before this kind of happened to him, so that was lucky. But it's a great book, super scary, super freaky. It took me a long time to get through because I had to keep starting and stopping. But kind of a seminal book on this topic. But I think that this book, does he mention communion at all?
No, I didn't see that. But to be fair, this book is only one of like many that Bud Hopkins has written about UFOs and different aspects of it. So just because it's not in this book in particular, I wouldn't say that I would have every reason to think that he's probably mentioned somewhere in Bud Hopkins' history of, you know, his literature, somewhere in his literature.
Yeah, I was just curious. So that's really my only experience with hypnotic regression. Oh, and of course, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind.
Oh, true. That
which
movie.
was scary as hell.
Yeah, and that also involved Screen Memories as well.
Yeah,
That's a
all the
really scary
classic.
movie. Highly recommend. If you're interested in like a found footage alien horror that is really, really believable.
And terrifying.
And it's like true
on,
story format.
yeah, it's on Amazon Prime Video. Not an advertisement. We just really want you to watch the
Yeah,
movie.
like just watch it. Yeah. If by some luck you knew somebody that used to work at a Blockbuster and they somehow have like a DVD copy watch that too.
My college town had a family video still, which they're common in the Midwest. And it was amazing. I loved going there and picking out videos all the time. It felt like we were in the 90s again.
Yeah, that's always a good day.
Not that I lived through the 90s. I was 4 in the end of the 90s, so oops.
Well, Carol Rainey makes an impassioned argument like in favor of Bud Hopkins' research and his hypnotic regression, which I will just want to say first that my take on it is that I think that it's very, very easily contaminated with false memories. So I think that it's really, really important that you're able to consider the entire picture and maybe have like the actual transcript.
What do you mean by false memories? Like, are these those screen memories? Or are these dreams mixed in?
So when I say that like hypnotic regression is really prone to the implantation of false memories, what I mean is that people in a hypnotic state are highly suggestible. And therefore, while I admit that it may be possible that they're able to pull out memories that they might not otherwise be able to access, I also think that the fact that they're in that state means that they're vulnerable to suggestion. So the line of questioning and also like the discussion around the topic, that any like history of discussion that person has had with the interviewer, the one doing the hypnotizing, would be important, because I just would think that otherwise it would really taint, the results essentially.
Yeah, I agree.
So
That
I
makes
just
sense.
think it's so easily corrupted that you can't take it at its face.
Yeah.
Not that it's impossible. Just my take on it.
So does that mean that you don't believe any of these stories?
I would not say that. I just think that that's my little like skeptic pill that I try to take with every with every rabbit
Take
hole.
twice daily.
Yeah,
with
like
food.
exactly. so it's just my little dose of skepticism. I like to think of myself as a skeptic who likes to wander off and enjoy like fun things, but it doesn't mean I don't believe things either. But Carol Rainey says that our current scientific understanding of the universe is totally incapable of explaining certain areas of human experience. Without any ready tools, mainstream science tends to ignore paranormal and anomalous experiences such as telepathy, precognition, and any form of mystical experience, including near-death experiences or a feeling of oneness within the universe, no matter how often reported. So she goes on to make the argument that not only is it important for the future of humanity for us to study and master this phenomena, but it's necessary for the survival of our species as a whole, which I think crosses over the line into occultish territory.
I think it makes a lot of assumptions. like why? I like that's my like why? Why is it? Do they think that? I mean, I know what's coming. I don't want to spoil the ending of a whole thing, but why? That's all I'm gonna. That's all I can say.
Hopefully, by the end of this, I can give you an answer to why.
Yes.
I'm hoping I can,
Okay.
according to them.
I also have a question. Did we mention Carol Rainey's qualifications? Like, does she have an education, or is it just?
She used to be.
Hopkins?
Yeah, she used to be a literature and writing professor.
Okay, so she has.
Yeah. So,
like,
but her background is mainly in, I would say, writing, research, and production.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's kind of her thing. Oops.
Well, that makes me feel a lot better about the things she's saying. Not to be rude or imply anything about Carol Rainey, because girl, you sound like a boss babe.
Absolutely.
But I wanted to make sure this isn't one of those situations where like Bud Hopkins just has like a really devoted wife who's like, oh yeah, I'm here for this. I will say everything in your book intro, like, and maybe she's not actually involved, but seems very clearly to me that she is involved and very
Yeah.
smart. And
They each do their own intros, and they each write different chapters too. Because it was so
do
funny.
they
'cause
sound different?
they do sound different, but there was a few times where I found myself like trying to keep a time frame because I was still trying to catch her up in that lie, or like what I think is a lie. That I think she lied. I think she lied about
Never
never
hearing about
having
it.
heard of an alien abduction as of 1995. I
I
just
mean,
I
I
straight
feel
up
like,
just it's a lie.
and my experience probably isn't even relevant. Like, I grew up in a family where we talked about everything, and I remember knowing about alien abductions. Like, I think, but as long as I've had consciousness, like, it's always been a thing I knew in my greater knowledge. Like, I don't understand.
Back in 1995, those little green aliens were a 50-cent sticker at the Pizza
Exactly.
Hut. So you can't
Yeah.
tell me, like, I just, I just can't. So anyway, like, the only reason I even question her integrity was because that is such a fantastic statement to say that, that you lived in this world with a hunger for knowledge
Yeah.
and studying as much as you can and being open-eyed and aware of what's
And
going
had
on
never
and
even-
never having heard of that concept when it was like a part of the zeitgeist of culture at that point. So how
And
did you miss out on that?
How old was she in 95? At least in her 30s.
She was an adult. I mean,
Yeah.
well into
'Cause if
being
she's
an
a
adult.
professor in school,
maybe
I mean-
not quite middle-aged yet, or maybe middle-aged. Who knows?
That's
Something like
absurd.
that. But
No
definitely older than 20s.
Do you think if we roast her enough, she'll unfriend you on Facebook?
If she would
She
just,
doesn't know your
I would
last
be
name,
so
so-
happy if she just noticed me. I would take that as like the ultimate compliment. And like, I appreciate that she always took the time to respond, even though like my messages that I've sent her like 2 messages and they're both like fangirling. And just like, so.
Who would you be if you weren't fangirling?
Well, okay. So it's like so this book builds up to like it starts out by talking about really interesting scientific technology that we have, and then it ends with like a very frightening conclusions about what the alien agenda is and what it's all for. And they but the first thing they do is they start to talk about like, we don't want you to think that we're crazy. This is like some of the things that are on like the fringes of science right now. Like, but when I say fringes, I mean recently discovered, that explain in some way alien technology, like when applied to the macro scale, that we have micro instances of technology. And one of them is like the tractor beam, or the beam me up Scotty, which of course was never said in the original Star Trek. It's just like a meme that exists and lives. But anyway,
My father-in-law would love that you pointed that out. So here's to you, Guy. Thinking about you as we record. We should watch Star Trek because I've never seen it. And he's probably going to
it's
hear that.
amazing.
And now he's going to make me watch
I love
it.
it. Oh no,
Andy's been
we
dying
have
to get me to watch it.
If he doesn't want, if they don't want to watch it, okay, Guy, if they don't want to watch it at Mel's house, you can come over and we'll make steaks and we'll watch it on my big screen.
Oh, we can
okay?
all
And
get
forget-
together
you
and
know,
eat
I'm
steaks
just
and
saying.
watch it. That's a family event where I come from.
We actually have some form of tractor beam technology, but what we've been able to do is it's called optical tweezers. And so we've been able to focus like beams of light at a really, really small level to move like photons around. And so it's on like a very micro scale, but it does, we are able to use light to pick up and hold particles and move them. The other thing we have that aliens may potentially also make use of on a better scale is we do have LED masking technology. So we have the ability to essentially coat a craft in like an LCD outer layer, I guess, and it has cameras on each side, and one camera takes in what the visuals are on one side and then projects it through to the other so that
Oh,
you have essentially an invisible
okay.
craft.
I've read about this. I remember hearing it in reference to like camouflage on bodies. Like they were trying to make it so that you wear like a camera on your chest and it reflects, it takes what's in front of you and puts it on your back.
Yep.
That's pretty awesome.
Yep.
It's crazy, you know, you hear these things, like I see them on my, you know, my phone, they just pop up on Google or whatever, but you never think of them in reference to aliens. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, of course aliens could use that to hide a spaceship in the sky, but that's not that's not something that's on my radar when I open up Google. That's crazy. I don't know.
I did save the most staggering piece of technology for last, like the technology that I didn't even believe in originally. Like when I read it in the book, I was like, you guys are literally shitting me. But apparently, we have managed to exceed the speed of light by essentially encouraging pulses of light to travel in a bunch, which gives them group velocity, is what they called it. So the conclusion of the experiment was that when the speed of light is exceeded even by a factor of 1/300th, the light appears to travel backwards in time. And this may explain missing time events or time dilations around the areas of purported abductions.
Okay, so I need to summarize this out loud so I can wrap my brain around it. So, if aliens are using technology to slow down time, stop time, or time travel, that means that they are able to gather light pulses and squish them together so that they then act as a group and move fast enough that they just exceed time. That time does not become a factor in their existence because we perceive them as moving backwards, but that to me means that they can go, you know, up, down, all around. Like,
Exactly.
so, okay, so that's what that means. So that
Yeah.
means they basically have proven that time means nothing then,
Absolutely.
which is, oh, I love that. I love that. We say that all the time. I say that all the time. I have ADHD and I always say like time means nothing to me. I can't sense it. I can't get a grasp on like how long it takes me to do something or drive somewhere. I have zero idea. So,
And keep in mind that this exceeding the speed of light, the LED cloaking, and what was the other thing that I mentioned too? The optical tweezers, like these are all things I cross-checked them from the book. I cross-checked the studies that were cited, and this is actual real technology that we have. Or at least, even if the experiments haven't been repeated or like further expounded upon, this was research and development that happened. So we
yeah.
know like these are things we've accomplished and we've done. But let me tell you, there are some really creepy stories in this book. Like in one of them,
You know, yeah. Oh, sorry. Go. I have a comment about this one.
in one of them, a lady mentioned only as Joan sends Bud a letter in which she describes, quote, a virtual lifetime of anomalous events involving herself and her family members, strange figures in her room, episodes of extended physical paralysis, missing time, and other experiences typical of UFO abductions. According to Joan, she had laid her two older children down for a nap on the second story of the apartment, while she took the youngest downstairs to be changed. She was not sure if she heard something or if she just had a feeling, but she ran back upstairs suddenly to check on her children, only to find the screen missing from the open window and the children gone from their beds. When she ran to look out the window, she saw nothing on the ground below. After a frantic search of the house, she unlocked the apartment door and ran outside. Her two children were found piled on top of one another at the bottom of the cement cellar steps. They did not cry or speak, as if they were winded. Joan called for help, and a neighbor loaded them into the back of a car and took them to the doctor, who declared them perfectly healthy without a scratch. When the children began to talk again, they both said that they were leaning out of the window to look at the, quote, silver airplane, and that afterward they floated down.
You know, this brings up just so much. First of all, holy crap. So these kids just magically floated to the ground and didn't hurt themselves. And this brings up a whole other thing of how much of children's testimonies can we accept as truth? Because children, I did go to school to be in education, but I didn't get a lot of early children education classes. I don't know how much we can trust what kids say. Like, I know that we can trust them to tell them, like, to tell us when they're being abused and stuff. I know about that kind of thing. But in terms of trying to figure out what they actually saw that day, and a child being able to, if this is, if any of this is real, being able to discern between an abduction experience and real life, is that even possible? That's just a thought.
I mean, you bring up a really good question, but here, I think in this situation, and like the other thing, that not only were the cellar stairs like 3 stories below the apartment window, but they were also 7 feet over to the left. And
wow.
being that the only other exit out the apartment was the door, which was locked from the inside. So she unlocked it to get out. So somehow those kids went out the window. I mean, that's the only way they could have gotten out, is if they went out the window and, make it make sense.
My only explanation, and I'm not defending. I'm prone to believe the alien abduction. Prone to believe every story, baby. But the only way I can see this work is if that girl, I say little girl, I just assume they're all female because that's me. If one of the children picked up the other child and then leaped out the window to the left or right, was it left? Yeah, to the left, so that they were able to, because I bet a kid could get 7 feet by the time they hit the ground, but that doesn't explain the fact that they weren't hurt after falling 3 stories. Like,
yeah, the
you would
doctor
break your
said
legs.
They were fine, and the kids act like they were fine. I mean, they
weren't crying.
They
or
said
scared.
that they were winded, possibly. It was like they weren't even certain if they were really winded. But
and kids will
cry. They were stunned.
Kids
they didn't
will cry
say
because
anything.
they're scared. Like, kids will cry even if they're not hurt because they're shocked. And the fact that they're not even crying or giving any reaction is weirder than if they had been crying.
And they were sitting one on top of the other.
That's just so
like
weird.
At the bottom of the cellar stairs.
It's so odd. It's like, we'll talk about this a little bit in Missing 411, but there's something about a non-human phenomena that can never quite get things right. Like, it never quite hits the mark. Like with skinwalkers, there's something off about them. And with alien abductions, like, they can never quite get a screen memory that just feels right, or put the kids back in the right spot. They were close. They were 37 feet off, but they missed it.
Here's another really chilling abduction story from the book. Okay. Brisbane, Australia, 1978. Sam and Jenny decide to take their kids to the park, and during their visit, they pose for pictures with Sam and Jenny taking turns with the camera so everybody can kind of get in a photo. And then after taking these pictures, suddenly everyone in the family felt really odd, like uncomfortable, and they just wanted to leave.
Okay.
And then
food poisoning, maybe.
Yeah, sure.
That's my first thought. I'm sorry.
They all reported feeling hazy for the rest of the day. When the camera roll was developed, the family was actually missing out of 3 of the 8 photos that were taken that day.
Weird.
The ones in which the family were missing looked like an empty landscape. Like it was just, they were just missing from the photos.
Weird.
And the photos had a strange red tint to them.
Okay, so can I go? Yeah. So what I guess they're saying is that they were abducted in the split second between of the photo snapping.
Yes.
And then were put back by the time they stopped posing for the photo.
Yes.
So they'd have to use that time travel technology. I mean, obviously, right?
I mean, that, I think that's why they explained the concept of, using light to accelerate, to like
Yeah.
slow down the passage of time. Like, I think they build that up so that they can explain these stories and then they make sense.
Okay, well, keep telling me more. So.
Oh, sure. So upon examination of those photos, they appeared to be damaged by radiation exposure.
Okay.
Like,
Oh,
yeah.
that reminds me. Do you remember the podcast I told you to listen to? It's Astonishing Legends. It's called Abduction at Devil's Den, and it's a man. They interviewed Terry Lovelace, and he is an author and an abductee who tells his story, and he has a radiation like burn and poisoning, like a low level, when after his abduction experience.
Wow.
And he is what's amazing about his story is he's a really credible witness. He's in the Air Force when it happens to him, So
It's funny that you mention radiation because those.
Well, you mentioned radiation.
Well, well, actually, what I was gonna. Okay. All right.
Have
okay.
some of that juice I made for you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much.
sorry.
Let me have a sip of this fresh fruit juice, fresh pressed juice,
Can I
so I
tell
can get
them
all
what
my
what
vitamins.
it's made of? In my podcast stupor, like after a while of sitting here and recording, you start to think of nothing but the recording. And I was pouring Stella a drink, and I poured some Chardonnay, and then I took my box of rosé and added some rosé to her Chardonnay. So now she's got this beautiful orange juice ghetto mimosa, which is what we call them.
I just call any kind of mixture like that jungle juice.
It's pretty good, not gonna lie. Okay, sorry, we don't have to include that.
So those pictures, like if you were to compare those pictures and the radiation damage that they have, they are very similar to pictures taken at Chernobyl.
Oh.
Like around the time of the big
a
nuclear
lot of
meltdown.
radiation.
Yeah.
This isn't like a little bit of like a touch.
No, yeah.
This is a hefty sprinkle.
Exactly. A hefty sprinkle.
Well, so I assume, obviously, so tell us more about what these people experienced, because that I would, I'm forever looking at things from that asshole Bacon's perspective. We don't have to include that. But,
well, actually, both Sam and Joan were given hypnotic regression therapy years later, and each of them gives a startling account that seems to complement the other's recollection, like, very well, like they were separately, Joan recalls her and the children being pulled into the sky by a large beam of light, and then they were confronted by terrifying creatures that performed all of the typical weird probing experiments before returning them to the ground. Okay. And during Sam's regression session, he recalls essentially being trapped in his body and unable to move. So I guess at the moment of the abduction, he was looking through the camera lens and taking pictures while the rest of his family was being pulled aboard the ship.
And he was just frozen.
Exactly.
Okay.
And they're actually thinking that the action of freezing him is what caused him to press the button.
Oh, to press the shutter. Mm-hmm. Is that the word? The shutter?
Yeah.
I think that it's really common. I don't know how acquainted with alien abductions people are going to be. So that's the only reason I say this. I don't want it to sound condescending, but that is super common. Regression, and then regression bringing out fear. And it reminds me so much of in college, we would trap, wild animals for science. We're not hurting them or anything. We're just tagging them or, measuring them or whatever. But they are terrified, and it probably hurts them. And it seems like these abductees who tell their stories, they were terrified, they were in pain, and these creatures acted toward them with no empathy or care, or maybe just ambivalence towards what they were like. They couldn't understand. And that's very much how it feels to me, like how we look at animals in cages. We care for their well-being, but we don't necessarily understand the depth of what they feel. So,
yeah. And that's actually one of the scarier implications of the book is like, why haven't they reached out to us? And like, explain their agenda or their plan or whatever, but then like we don't explain to the mice that we experiment on like what
Exactly.
we're doing. We don't talk to them about it either, and it's like kind of on the same
Yeah, and I've
it's the
said
same
this
level.
before, you know, they don't have human intentions. It's not human. We can't possibly begin to understand another species' intention, especially in this kind of scale where they're collecting us and then probing us. Um, yeah, I think I remember hearing about that in like the Mothman type stuff. You know, like this phenomena doesn't have human intentions, and therefore we can't explain it with our human logic.
And one thing that I happened to notice in all of these abduction stories that I was reading about in the book is that there's always this state of like agitated confusion
Mm-hmm.
afterwards that these people experience. Like they just, they do things that are like they're irrationally angry or upset or like disoriented or essentially traumatized, I guess, just for the rest of the
Yeah.
day. It just that seems to be like a really compelling thread that I see that connects a lot of these stories together, because that's the one thing I'm looking for too, is just like what are all of these common themes.
And I want to mention too, like the trauma that these abductee victims, whether or not you believe it's real or not, it gives them trauma. And so we should treat them with, all the respect that we like give other
Sure.
victims of
Yeah.
trauma. The trauma that these abductees face is very real, no matter what we think about it. And I remember Whitley Strieber mentioning in Communion that one of the things that before he even remembered any of his abduction experiences, and as he was just about to kind of remember them, he realized he was walking around his house at night and locking all the doors and just circling the house and looking under all the beds and in the closets, and he didn't quite understand why, but he had an uneasy feeling about his environment. And that sounds a lot, my therapist would say, that sounds a lot like hypervigilance. Like if you have trauma about
Did his wife
something.
end up leaving him over that?
No, this is
Okay.
a different, that might have happened in another
I'm
story,
just
but
trying to say maybe I
you
did read
know,
his story in the
Whitley
book.
Strieber's wife, she actually became really involved in his research, helped him write his next couple books, and she underwent hypnotic regression as well. And basically, oh, her story is cool. She talks about how she is like we should just do a whole communion episode, but she talks about how she is like a protector. Like her job is to protect Whitley no matter what these things do to him, and she's there to make sure that he never realizes that it's real. It's really creepy. Like you see how these things have oh, not like they haven't created a timeline or a narrative, but they have implied things in these people's subconsciouses that leads them to form their own. Maybe they've given this implication to her once or twice that you need to keep him quiet about this, and it stays with you. There's something about these experiences that give you deep trauma, and they deeply change the way you act as a human. And that seems real. I mean, no matter what you think they're actually going through, that is real. And you can't make that up. You can't force your body to undergo trauma reactions. It's not like hypochondria. Like, it's not like I can convince myself that I have COVID probably and start losing my sense of smell. But I can't convince myself that I've been probed by aliens and, have the trauma to prove it. So,
So generally, I would say that with all these stories of alien abduction, that's kind of where they leave it. Like in other collections that I've read, they're like, these are the experiences that we've had, and like it means that
mhm.
more research needs to be done. But that is not at all where Bud Hopkins leaves this topic. It actually goes on, like that's just the beginning of the rabbit hole. So they're like, okay, now we've pretty well established that we kind of have some of the technology that the aliens might have, just in a more advanced form that would show that they're able to abduct us at will. But is it possible that they live among us?
Mm. Do you remember that clickbaity article? It was like a meme from forever ago, and it was like, British scientist says that aliens are already among us. And it's this really creepy looking guy, and like it's like he's the alien, like
Oh, no.
it's him. That's
Well,
what
like
you reminded me of.
that, I mean, definitely a similar energy going on here. And like this is what they have to say about it. If we accept that thousands of well-investigated UFO abduction cases provide authoritative evidence that non-human alien beings are visiting our planet, we must now consider the unsettling possibility that they are also living on Earth. They may be only temporary residents, but they are operating unnoticed among humans, helping to facilitate an as yet undisclosed agenda. It sounds pretty sinister, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. But so before we started this, I've had a change of heart in the last 40 minutes. Before we've started this, I was like, that agenda seems pretty dramatic, like seems a little suspicious. But now I'm thinking about the trauma that I remember reading about in communion and just the trauma of that one story we talked about. My bad. And I can see why you might think that their intentions are negative. So that's all. I'm sorry. All I wanted to interject with.
Well, I mean, Bud Hopkins' opening to this chapter is kind of that segue into a greater conversation about transgenic beings. So basically, what he is saying is that aliens have visited us, they do visit us, and they sometimes also create alien/human hybrid creatures.
The reason I'm not giggling is because it sounds crazy, but it also follows the narrative of almost every piece of alien, like media I've taken in the last 10 years. Like, I feel like every, like, Love and Saucers is that documentary we talked about, where that guy claims he's had relationships for years. I just think it's a narrative somehow that got in there that aliens are trying to create a race with us. I mean, isn't there like that? I've seen that stupid meme of like the alien and the chimp with the human baby. Like, have you seen that?
No, I haven't seen
We should
that.
put that in the show notes or something.
We will find it.
But anyway, it doesn't seem like a crazy idea to me. What do you think, listener? Just kidding.
I'm just particularly excited for this next part.
All right,
it's the weird alien sex stuff.
Oh, yeah.
That's right,
That
my
sounded
straights,
inappropriate.
gays, and theys. It's time for some intergalactic smut.
Fuck.
A lesser known and talked about aspect of the OG abduction story of Betty and Barney Hill in 1957 was the sex stuff. Like, and you can imagine why they wouldn't really report on that back then.
Yeah,
like,
kind of a product of its time thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like so it wasn't really widely reported at the time, but she said that she had been given a gynecological exam and she was tested for pregnancy through her navel. And Barney reported that samples were taken of his seminal fluid. But at the time, Betty's report that she had been tested for pregnancy through her navel made no sense because medical science didn't have any kind of testing like that, but now we do.
Oh, like ultrasounds? Is that
like we are able to test for all kinds of, like, we're able to do genetic testing, like of a
it
fetus.
Makes my belly button tingle
like
even
through that.
thinking about it.
I'm just saying, like, they're able. I'm just saying, like, she talked about something in 1957 that we're only just now able to do.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
like
that means something.
It's something.
Even though it makes my belly button
I have
feel
to
funny.
mention it, even if it's uncomfortable. I have to mention it.
It's only uncomfortable for me for some reason. I don't like things touching my belly button.
I mean, but admittedly, that is a very vanilla example of some smut. But you can imagine at the time it would have been absolutely scandalous. Like, but we can get dirtier.
I guess so. Is that a challenge?
No, in 1965, a story was published in a small, unnamed British UFO magazine about a man named Antonio Villas-Boas, who claimed that he was abducted and compelled to have sex with a small humanoid alien. He described her as having, quote, whitish blonde hair, a wide face with prominent cheekbones, and a pointed chin. He also said she had large blue eyes that were longer than they were round, which I thought was the
Sounds
creepiest.
like Squidward.
Yeah, like longer than they were round, like literally Squidward. And maybe this is all just like a Squidward fanfic, but it's in 65. So, but apparently, she forced him to have sex with her like 2 times in rapid succession. Okay. And then, after the second round of intercourse, she spooned from the side of his penis a small sample of sperm and placed it in a vial.
Okay, wait. Can we just be gross? Are you implying that she, like, spooned skin out of his penis? Or was there just, like, some liquid on his body that she picked up for a sample?
Let me take a drink
to be
PG.
For this
question.
I'm not that we're PG.
Oh, I'm not ready for this question. Okay,
well, you brought it up. Like, you brought up the story, and it makes it makes a difference, because I know that you have said that
hopefully all the children are in bed by now.
I really hope that no one's listening to our podcast with their little children around.
I hope that no one's listening ever. Don't listen.
I feel like after you listen to the first one with like 7 F-bombs, you would have gotten the picture.
Yeah.
And we're going to maybe try to get better about that. Maybe not. Fuck it.
It depends.
Fuck it.
No, but anyway, what I assume happened is that after the second round, she disembarked and then scooped up some juice and put it in a vial.
That sounds like some very thorough science. I mean, in all reality, 2 samples to get pregnant with, a sample for collection and record keeping. I mean, like, it sounds like, in high school in FFA, you learn about like AI. I don't know. It sounds like something I would have learned in an artificial insemination class.
So, am I jaded that I think that this story is like just a big humble brag?
It reminds me of those stories on Reddit on TIFU, Today I Fucked Up, where they're like, today I fucked up by accidentally having a threesome. It was the worst.
Right.
Like, and it's like, you're just humble bragging.
Like, I don't want to
But I do get this feeling that this isn't, a sexual description. Maybe you read the book. I didn't. I'm just reading from your notes. But you have quotes. And it seems to me that he's not describing this in a sexual way. I mean, he seems like he's trying to be descriptive, and everyone's got their weird thing. Maybe he gets off on describing it in a scientific way.
Yeah,
but
I just can't help but think that maybe he gets his kicks by, releasing, like, you got to imagine at that time, like, if you were an exhibitionist, that your opportunities would be smaller. You just wouldn't have as many opportunities to do your thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, who's to say?
But, afterward, he was left feeling angry and said that he had just been used as, quote unquote, a good stallion.
Yeah, okay, there's the exhibitionist right there.
Yeah.
There's the, like, oof.
That's
oop is what that makes me want to say. Oof. Yeah, let's move on from that one. I'll think about it.
Yeah, that's what makes me think it's some kind of bizarre humble brag.
But also thinking about the fact that Bud Hopkins put these in his book. Mm-hmm. Like, so I want to know his vetting process. I want to know, I guess I probably won't because he's dead, but rest in peace, Bud Hopkins. But that's just a thought running through my head, is like, he obviously chose to put it in his book, but he also decided to put Carol Rainey's I've never heard of alien abductions before, Bud. You're so smart. Like, that's how that feels to me. So.
I'd never even heard of such a thing.
I
was like a virgin, innocent flower.
What an educated, intelligent man
He came and pollinated my brain with all kinds of new information.
Like a honeybee to a flower.
Oh, man. So, yeah.
That should be the introduction for every one of our podcasts.
So, yeah. I don't know. There's also, there's many stories of fetuses going missing in pregnant women, including an obstetrics nurse whose fetus disappeared at the 5-month mark. And some abductees recall being re-abducted and reunited briefly with these missing children in subsequent episodes for short bonding sessions.
That's
So,
creepy.
yeah, isn't
That's
that
terrifying.
creepy? Yeah,
That's like,
right?
hey, we're going to impregnate you, put you through hormonal hell. Then we're going to take your baby out of you, but you're going to see it like an adoptive parent. Like,
Yeah.
you're going to see it every 5 years and you get to know that it's alive, but
Yeah.
that's it. And it's like, oh my God, what kind of nightmare.
Yeah, really.
A lot of these things are nightmarish, and now I'm kind of,
It
I'm
gets
feeling
worse.
like I understand Bud Hopkins' perspective towards the end a little bit, that this is like a survival thing, because it is terrifying what they're doing.
So, another unsettling question to consider that I'm going to quote directly from the book, that after it goes on to talk about, we talked about those, but quoting from the book, how many of you as young job applicants were ever personally invited to apply for a vaguely specified job, interviewed in a deserted building with minimal furniture and no signs of ongoing business, and were distinctly aware of sexual overtones in your interview with a boss who seemed to have paranormal abilities, who knew your intimate secrets from childhood up till the day before? I have 3 similar abduction scenarios centered around that I've collected. So the first is Terry, and she was 16 years old. A man approaches her at the pizza parlor, and he says, "Hey, I am hiring for a position. Why don't you come and see me at this address tomorrow? And I'll give you an interview for the job. I think you'll be a great fit." So she goes home to her mom, and her mom, for whatever reason, just agrees to the 16-year-old, going to...
I want to touch on that. Bookmark that.
Right?
Should I do it now?
Yeah,
It's
go ahead,
common.
touch on that.
It's just seems like another common thread in a lot of these abduction stories and a lot of paranormal phenomena. Bigfoot, skinwalkers, especially orbs and stuff like that. The more fringy stuff, the more likely you are to just completely accept it. It's like there's this mind altering component to whatever it is, and it will convince you or others in your immediate vicinity to just go along with whatever's going on. And it's like, what is the intention of that? Why does it want you to just go along with it? So that's my
and I mean, the mom like doesn't question it, and drives her the next day to a creepy looking abandoned office building.
Sounds like how to get serial killed.
Yeah, really. So she goes in there to the interview with this man, and he knows like intimate details about her life.
Like
Like he's able to tell her what she had for breakfast. He's able to tell her.
Does he just come up and he's like, "I know what you had for breakfast"?
Oh man, like it's just in this book, like the whole. Bud Hopkins includes the whole transcript of his conversation with her, like in this book, and I mean, but that's just the gist of it. Is just that he knows all these details about her life, like, and including that she had just lost her virginity the day before with her boyfriend.
Wow.
So like he told her about that. After they have that conversation, she goes with him to a second location.
Oh no, girl!
I know.
You never go to the second location.
Exactly.
Okay,
and like,
hold on. If women don't know this, I guess men too, but women mostly. If you don't know this, if you are, God forbid, you are in any type of situation where someone is trying to take you and harm you, you do not let them take you to the second location. If it means jumping out of a car, killing yourself, not killing yourself, that sounds traumatic, but jumping out of a car, hurting them, like, because the statistics say that if they take you to a second location, you're probably not going to make it out. So fight for your life. I'm getting chills now thinking about it, because it's you'd be surprised, like, how blasé of course I'm a woman, how I feel about my own personal safety sometimes, until you're in a situation where it's compromised, and then you realize, holy shit, I've been so blasé about this, and now I don't know what I'm going to do, even if it's not super dangerous.
And that's part of the case for why they say that these beings have telepathy, You know, like that they have ability to do mind control, because she's still, after that conversation where he
Yes.
tells her all these things that he knows about her.
Yeah.
She still
If-
goes with him to the second location.
Yeah, if I went to a job interview in a random building and this guy was like, "Oh, so you lost your virginity to your boyfriend last night," I would freak the fuck
Scream,
out,
right?
and I would nope out of
Right,
there. I
nope,
would
nope,
call my
nope,
mom. I would
nope.
run out the front of the building. I would not be like, "Oh yeah, let's go look at your office at a second location." Like,
And that's exactly what the second location is. Like, it's her quote unquote office. So he takes her to like another kind of abandoned office building and takes her up to like an abandoned floor. And all that's in it is like a desk, a chair, a wastebasket, and like a map on a wall. And he was like starting to explain to her like what her job would be. But then he starts making these really, really fumbling like sexual passes at her that almost are like so fumbling that they're not meant to be. It's almost like he is trying way too hard. Like he's not
like he's
doing
acting
it right.
out something maybe that he learned about human behavior, but that he's not a human, so he can't behave correctly.
Which is where we're gonna get to. I think.
Yeah. So
exactly
can I make some conclusions, or you just want to keep going? I'll
Let me
just let
make
you
sure
keep
that
going.
that's all the deals. Okay. Just to finish that, yeah, he makes that awkward pass at her that seems like very over the top and exaggerated, almost like just not right. But she still gets back in the car with him, and he takes her back to her mom, and she felt like her body was under his control the whole time.
So,
And then like the hypnotic regression sessions followed all of these experiences that like included more details.
yeah.
But
It's just crazy. Like, what do they stand to gain? Do they just want to impregnate these women with alien babies? Is that the gist of it? Why make if it's possible for you to abduct people, why put them through, why do this weird thing where you play an act or play a theater, when you can just like light beam them up and impregnate them when they're, like, it doesn't make any sense. Makes me. Do you think that there are different races of aliens, and like maybe several of them are abducting us and doing these things to us, and we wouldn't be able to understand? And maybe that's why some of these experiences seem clunky and uneducated, and some of them are seamless because they're different people.
I would say that there's like I've seen two major descriptions of aliens like in my lifetime, and those with the exaggerated eyes and those with the exaggerated head proportions. So I feel like if anything, maybe there's two types. I don't know, but I will tell you like
at least like 6 or 7 different types of aliens.
I mean, for sure though, like the main one is the grays. Like that's what you hear everybody talk about, and that's what they refer to like in Sight Unseen. They just mostly refer to grays.
That's mostly what I've heard of. It seems like too that there's like time periods. Like it's interesting to, my theory of the universe is that, there's like that giant picture of the universe where like our Milky Way galaxy is like in the corner, and there's all these other stars and planets. And I just kind of think that us as Earth, we're like one of those distant planets in Star Wars, like a sand planet that, I know it's pretty empty. We're kind of on the outskirts of the universe, our technology is not so great. We're kind of crude. And there's this whole other galaxy of culture taking place without us. And it's these different types of aliens that people have encounters with speak to that there are different civilizations out there completely unto themselves. In the 60s and 50s, it was common to see what were like called the Nordics. And they were like really tall, blonde people who were really beautiful. And Orfeo Bocelli or something. I should know the guy's name. We should do one on him. He had a great experience with Nordic alien type people. So they're called the Nordics, but obviously I'm not talking about Norwegian people. Sorry, Norwegian listeners.
Because that's where they were seen.
No, because they are like blonde, Aryan race looking people. I don't know who coined it. Sounds pretty racist to me.
I have 3 of these job interview stories.
Oh, sorry.
No, this is number 2.
Okay.
Lisa, in her early 20s, she thinks that it was an ad in the paper, but she's not entirely sure, like what it really was.
And that's creepy too.
Yeah, like she doesn't quite remember. She's like, I think it was an ad in the paper. She shows up to a mostly abandoned building with a receptionist. And she asked the receptionist where the ladies' room is. And this lady panics when Lisa asks her this question, just totally panics. And she ends up just like staring at Lisa for a few minutes and then just like running out of the room like she didn't know what to say.
Wow, that's
And
not
then,
sketch.
and then at that point, a black man comes out and he has this presence to him of like former military, like very curt, very like standing up straight, not a hair out of
Upstanding guy,
place,
yeah.
like very, authoritative and all of that. And he ushers her to a back room that only has a desk, a wastebasket, and a water cooler. And he starts talking to her about this job while he offers her a drink of water from the water cooler.
Okay.
And this is like a security job. And she remembers thinking like, I am not thirsty. I don't want any water because I have to pee. That's why I was looking for the ladies' room before this interview.
Yeah,
So,
before the receptionist ran away from me.
Exactly. And she was like,
At that point, you've already got to have red flags up.
Uh-huh.
So.
Yeah, and she was like, so I already have to, yeah, she's like, I have to pee. I don't want to drink any water, but she just does anyway. She just starts drinking water. And he starts droning to her about the job. Like, he starts talking to her in like a really droning voice, and like she doesn't get a chance to say anything in between. And the whole time, like, he's talking to her in this droning voice, and she starts getting sleepier and sleepier, and she can feel herself nodding off. And then the next thing she knows, she's standing up, and he's like telling her how the interview went really great, and is like shoving her out the door.
Yeah, that's terrifying. It sounds a lot like they just drugged and hypnotized her straight up. I mean, if this were not if we weren't talking about aliens right now, I would just say that she maybe had been date raped.
Yeah,
that's how scary
exactly.
that feels.
And a lot of them feel that way.
Like, that's terrifying.
I mean, they feel that way.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying, is like the trauma is very similar to like PTSD, like assault. Like it reminds you of that, and it's like, these poor people.
Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and take a quick break, and then we'll come back and finish this. And we're back.
Perfect.
And the last story is Sally. She gets a call to report for an interview.
Wait, can I just interject? I'm sorry. So these are all 3 young women.
Yes.
Okay, these are women at least in their 20s or younger.
Yep, we have a cluster.
Okay,
we do indeed have a cluster.
Even more suspicious.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sally actually reports that she got a call to report for an interview. Mm-hmm. So like somebody called her house and just said, you need to report for this job interview.
Sounds a little Men in Blackish.
Yeah, it's really strange.
That's a little creepy. Mm-hmm. I would not go to like, if someone called me, I'd be like, I didn't sign up for anything. Like, I would not go to that. Maybe I'm too stranger.
See, that's the thing. Like, she says that normally she would too. Like, normally, she was like, but for some reason, she's like, for some reason, I took the directions down that they gave me, and like, I even left early to make sure that I would be there on time, but I didn't have any problem following the directions that they gave me, and I showed up right there.
That's just crazy.
Yeah, and
that's the feeling it gives me. Like, ooh.
Apparently, the job was for perfume sales.
What the fuck?
Yeah, and
who gets hold up?
Okay, right. Okay,
you are a perfume salesman.
Yeah.
Where did you get your job? Did you walk into Macy's and go, "Hi, I need a minimum wage job because I'm a kid," or did you get recruited? Did you get headhunted to sell perfume? Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, fair question.
Yeah.
So the male interviewer, when she comes in, she sits down to talk with him. It's another like minimally. Like a shop, a business with minimal furniture. So it's like very bare bones, almost like set dressing. And he has all these perfumes like set up on a table, and he says that it's a perfume sales job. And he puts the perfume under her nose. Mm. And from the moment that he puts the perfume under her nose, and she remembers thinking like, I don't want to smell it. Like, I don't want to smell it. Don't put it in my nose. And he puts it in her nose, and then the next thing that she remembers is that she's sitting in her car and her pantyhose are on crooked. and like not on all the way. Like, you know how when you put on
Yeah,
a
they're
pair of
not pulled up all
pantyhose
the way, and
yourself,
you
like
have to.
the crotch was like down at the knees, you know, like, so, because when you put on pantyhose yourself,
You have
like
to like jump into them.
exactly. And you have to like roll it up. And I was thinking about it while I was reading this story, and I was wondering, like, is it possible to put on someone else's pantyhose, like,
Oh, I've never thought about that.
as good as you could yourself?
Yeah, I can't. I have a hard time trusting babies. So I'm probably not a good person to ask for this.
Yeah,
But,
really.
oh God, that's just, ew, it's so skeevy. It
And
gives me
she,
skeevy
yeah,
vibes. But
she remembers sitting in the car, and she like had to readjust her pantyhose, and she doesn't remember like anything that happened.
these all give me, there is, in all of these stories, there is a trigger. In all three of them, there's something that happens that suddenly they can't remember anything. So there's the perfume, the glass of water, and what was the other one? The awkward passes. That
Yeah.
seemed like the weird thing that was like, or maybe the virginity. Like he knew the weird shit about
Yeah.
her life. That one didn't necessarily have a trigger, but it was like, it's
And she felt
terrifying.
like he was controlling, like she just did all
Yeah.
those things like under his direction.
So I would love to know. I know you might not be able to answer this, but this is just a little bit of curiosity. I'd love to know how these women felt about their experiences. Like, did they really feel like they were assaulted, or did they just feel like, they just don't remember?
Well, I know that of the three girls, the one with the perfume, she actually declined to be to go through the
regression.
therapy, like hypnosis.
I don't doubt. I don't blame people. I don't doubt that her experience might have been something more than she wanted to admit. But I've heard this before on other podcasts, and I love the idea. I just think the phenomenon is crazy that there are people who, regardless of whether they think it might be real or not, cannot accept even the idea that this might be a possibility of something that happened to them, and so they reject it. It's like
Yeah.
every other person I meet who's like, ghosts aren't real, or insert whatever isn't real, and it's like, okay, is it not real, or do you not even want to entertain the idea that it might be real, because it'll bring down the world you know it to be. The world as you know it to be will come crashing down around you because it doesn't fit in.
Yep.
So
And like looking back at these stories, like the question that I think would be first and foremost on anyone's mind would be why? Like why?
Agree, yeah, why are they doing
why
this?
would aliens be interested in having fake job interviews?
Yeah.
Like the theory in the book is that this is actually a form of socialization for the more human-like generations of transgenic beings.
Oh, so you think that maybe, I'm sorry, am I getting ahead of you? Go ahead.
I mean, like you think about it this way, an abduction takes place, like Betty and Barney Hill, okay, and a hybrid is created. Like from the samples taken, a hybrid is created with alien creatures, and then that hybrid is more human, but it's not enough to like pass.
Okay.
But if you repeat the cycle for a few generations, eventually you have something that's neither alien nor human, but the gap in appearance may be closed, so it looks like human.
Yeah.
But those beings will still require socialization to fit in. And like that could certainly explain Lisa's baffling bathroom question.
Okay.
And a few of these so-called normies, like I shit you not, the book calls them normals, I think, like, but
so
they
the
call them
people-
normals.
Those are the hybrids.
The hybrids that not so the first generation of hybrids, which are more like the ones from that 1967, like magazine where he's talking about that he had intercourse with this lady twice in a row and that she only looked a little bit human. Like that was what they call like generation one.
Okay, gotcha.
And then eventually, as you go down the line and keep repeating these, transgenic births, eventually
Keep
you get to a
hybridizing.
point. Yeah, you keep hybridizing them. Thank you, until the point that they look very human, but they may not have any understanding or context. So, like that's the idea.
Yeah, because
is
they're
that
obviously not growing up on Earth with humans, so they've got to be weird.
so these fake job interviews are social experiments. So that explains
That's
like
crazy.
Yeah.
That gives me like those vibes of like YouTube bros who are like, oh, it's a prank, bro. Like like bring the real humans around so that our zoo humans that we've bred can learn how to interact. It's like some weird interspecies zoo. You know, it's like us going to a petting zoo. It's that's way weirder than I would have expected Bud Hopkins could ever have gotten with this. Like, honestly, like I wasn't expecting anything that odd.
And okay, so this is where, so I actually had to get 226 pages into the book before I could isolate what I would call a hypothesis for the book.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but this sentence that I pulled from the book, I would say is the hypothesis statement.
Okay.
And that would explain what the whole book is about and what they're talking about and what they're leading to and what they want you to leave with. And is, it is possible that over time, whether it's decades or millions of years, we don't know, that UFO visitors have systematically designed a transgenic species that combines human appearance and the ability to pass in our culture along with certain alien abilities, telepathy or mind reading, remote control over one or more human subjects, and even an ability to step in and out of this material reality as needed.
Wow. So that's so broad. My first reaction is like, wow, that's pretty damn broad. It is. I can see how he backs it up. I mean, all of his stories. I mean, you only read me a couple, and like, it all kind of backs it up. It is a theory. I mean, I'll be honest. I've never thought about why aliens might be doing this before. I've always been interested in the stories of what they do to people, but I've never really understood why or cared to think about why. And it seems like that might be a logical conclusion, is that they just want our genetic stock. You know, we're like livestock to them, and they need that genetic material.
I could see it being as simple as, they came to us and seeded their genetic material into us because they could.
Yeah.
And like that would be reason enough. Like they came and they did it because they can, because they're scientific too, because they're curious too,
Yeah, what do you think about that theory that aliens treat us like a conservation planet? And they're showing up to basically ensure that our genetics live on, like they're basically like treating us like an endangered species. Because I think that's ironic.
I think that it's really reassuring, and I'm very skeptical of any theory that's really reassuring because I feel like that's not realistic. Yeah,
yeah, they don't give a crap
like
whether we survive or not.
If it's optimistic, I'm naturally a little skeptical of the validity of that.
I love it. Well, what do you think? What else do you think?
I mean, it's a mind-blowing. It's a mind-blowing read. Sight Unseen: Science, UFO Invisibility and Transgenic Beings by Bud Hopkins and Carol Rainey. And I'll be honest, I didn't get all the way through the book. I've still got a good third of it left to read. And at this point, where I realized at page 226, where I had finally isolated the hypothesis statement, that I had gone as far as I needed to. But I will say this, if ever in the future there's a demand for me to go back and finish the last little third of this book, I'm willing to potentially revisit that by popular demand.
Can I just give like my general final thoughts, and then
please, absolutely,
you can finish us up when
Sounds
I'm done?
Great.
So I guess what I really want to touch on is just the horror of this. And I don't want to scare people. I'm not saying that we should all be afraid and we should go build shelters. But when we got into this topic, when we started this book, I mean, you lent me this book before we even thought about podcasting, and you told me to read it, and I read a couple parts of it, but it didn't seem as scary to me. And like you said, it took you a long time to find what it's really about, but it does seem absolutely terrifying that, basically what they're saying is they are taking us and using like us kind of like animals, without our knowledge, especially not our consent, but without our knowledge as to why. And they're also infiltrating our society in weird ways, like using us to teach transgenic beings how to be more human-like, or basically just like training for these people. It's it goes beyond anything you ever read about aliens. It's different than UFOs, and I love that. I love speculating about, like, because let's be honest, if aliens, I believe, I'm a full alien believer. I believe Roswell was real and that that was the beginning of our government interacting with aliens. I think that was the very beginning. And it makes sense to me that after, when was that? That was 1940s, 50s.
Hmm.
70 years later, it makes sense to me that this is the progression that that alien technology has reached, you know, is now being able to create generations of uh, like hybrid species and do, you know, doing God knows what with them because we as little plebs, we will never get the big picture of what anyone wants. So I mostly just, it's it is
I mean, it's
very
a,
intriguing and very horrifying, and I can't wait to read more.
it's repeating cases like over and over again of people describing these experiments being done on them that make no
Mhm.
sense in the context of their own time, but now makes sense to us.
Yeah,
Like
that.
back then, they couldn't comprehend that there would be any kind of test like through a woman's belly
Mhm.
button to like test a pregnancy. But now
Yeah,
we know, like we can run. That's how we can do genetic testing, like
yeah,
of infants now.
yeah,
So
and like
it's just
that is the
insane.
one. I mean, not the only scientific part about this whole thing, but that is the most compelling about all of this,
Hmm.
is that he lays out technology that if all these abductee stories are real, then these technologies must have been true. And here's how those technologies actually could work with our physics on our planet. Because I think
Hmm.
that's a big thing too for skeptics. There's always like that, well, life can't exist as we know it. It's like, as we know it is kind of a big little, like, you know, little side note in that thing because as we know it means a lot. And, um, you know, but to say that these aliens can simulate our environment as we know it says a lot to their intelligence and a lot to our just ourselves as a planet and a humanity. You know, I don't think we're as evolved as we think we are. Anyway,
So what I would take away from all of this is if you have missing time that you can't explain, if you
oh, we haven't even talked about missing time yet.
no, I
We need
know
to do a
this.
whole episode on our own missing time experiences. Can I? I'm sorry, you finished. I'm gonna add
No,
something.
no, I just mean like uh, what I walked away from after reading this book is that alien abduction experiences can feel exactly like that time that you showed up to work without realizing how you got there.
Mm-hmm.
Like those really relatable moments that we all experience as human beings, like especially if you're in like autopilot and you're not paying attention and then all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, oh man, how'd I get here? I
Yeah.
mean, for some people, their alien abduction, that's all the evidence that they have that it happened.
Yeah.
So it really could have happened to anybody and it could have happened to you. And I just want you to remember that it could have happened to you. And it might be happening to you on an ongoing basis, which means it'll happen again soon.
So sweet dreams,
Good night.
listeners.
Can't wait to see you next time.
Yeah, come back next week for maybe more conspiracy shelf, maybe something else. Actually, we have an amazing episode next week about a missing 411 story about a woman in a red coat and my own Sasquatch investigating experiences. So
I'm so excited. Oh man, we've got all the Sasquatch tea.
check us out on Patreon. Come support us there, and come back next week
Okay,
on
I miss you already.
come back next week on Everything Under the Moon.
Y'all come back now, you hear?